It's the Acting Income Podcast with Ben Hauck, episode 36. SAG-AFTRA, stand-ins, and the photo double rate. Or, the scandal of the missing upfront increase of nearly 17%.
It's the Acting Income Podcast with Ben Hauck. Turn your passion into income, Ben will show you how. With all the resources that you need to make it as an actor in an expensive city. To stay balanced and make money, you really can't go wrong with actingincome.com.
Welcome to the Acting Income Podcast. I'm Ben Hauck, your host of the podcast on making money as you make it as an actor. Thank you for downloading this episode. If you're new to the podcast and haven't subscribed yet, pull up Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app and click the subscribe button. You'll get episodes right as they come out. This is episode 36, titled SAG-AFTRA, Stand-ins, and the Photo Double Rate, or the scandal of the missing upfront increase of nearly 17%. The show notes for this episode have links to all the important documents I referenced in today's show. You can pull them up right now at actingincome.com/episode 36. But first, a word from our sponsor for this episode, Stand-In Central. If you've ever wanted to know what the heck a stand-in is, or if it's the night before and you booked your first ever stand-in job, Stand-In Central is here to help. With simple instructions on how to stand in, to deep dives into stand-in topics, Stand-In Central offers tons of free information about the job of the stand-in. And if you're in a hurry, you can download our ebook, The Stand-In Handbook, plus the great mini reference, the Call Sheet Cheat Sheet. To download the ebooks and unlock additional material on the site, visit standincentral.com. That's standincentral.com. Are you a SAG-AFTRA member? Or do you maybe work on feature films or dramatic television shows signed to SAG-AFTRA contracts? If so, pop some popcorn, because I think this story will widen your eyes a bit. It's a story about acting, income, and misrepresentation. Not just in the sense of representing things in a way that is false to facts, but also in the sense of labor representation, and of the labor union SAG-AFTRA misrepresenting contract terms to members, and also not fighting for members to give them what's spelled out in their contract. First, a confession. This is a very niche topic. Very niche. This is the topic of stand-ins, those people on a set around whom production sets up lights and cameras. More specifically, this is the topic of stand-ins who also do photo double work on the same day. Photo doubles are people who work on camera in place of another actor, often for insert shots of hands and shoulders and the like. Furthermore, this is such a niche topic that it only affects stand-ins who photo double on feature films and dramatic TV shows in the New York zone, basically New York City and the surrounding area. But before you dismiss this niche topic as not relevant to you, hold up. This story has major implications for actors and income, and whether SAG-AFTRA is misrepresenting things to its members. If you're a SAG-AFTRA member who voted on the television Theatrical Agreement back in the summer of 2017, this story calls into question whether you voted on one thing, but were delivered another thing, what you might call a bait and switch. It's a story that has jerked around the compensation of stand-ins I know and work with. And this story has meant, in the end, considerably less pay for their work when they photo double, which I believe they should be earning per the contract language. By the end of this podcast episode, I believe you will agree with me that stand-ins who photo double should earn more pay than SAG-AFTRA says they should, and that SAG-AFTRA failed its members in misrepresenting the agreement they voted on, as well as failed to address serious contract questions in a timely manner in a way that would benefit members on the job. This story will make you mad at SAG-AFTRA, and if you're like me, inevitably sad. This story is a little long, so let me break it up a bit so you can digest it. The first part of the story begins in June 2017 and goes until mid-August 2017, before SAG-AFTRA members voted on whether to ratify the proposed 2017 television theatrical agreement. The second part of the story is the period from mid-August until December 2017, the time after SAG-AFTRA members voted on the agreement. And the third part of the story is the period from January 2018 until, well, now, which is April 19th, 2018, when I'm releasing this podcast episode. And because this is a little long, let me summarize it a bit, and then I'll flesh it out. Basically, in July 2017, SAG-AFTRA promoted without qualification that photo doubles would make a nearly 17% increase in pay under the newly proposed television theatrical agreement. But SAG-AFTRA couldn't publicly answer the question about what stand-ins who photo double would make under the proposed agreement. SAG-AFTRA members voted to ratify the agreement, but eventually members found out that stand-ins who photo double not only did not receive a nearly 17% increase in their wage, but the wage they'd get for photo doubling did not compute with the contract language. And the person most responsible at SAG-AFTRA for vetting that wage wouldn't reply to explain his reasoning. So, now I begin the story. And here's why I say what I just said. In June 2017, SAG-AFTRA and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers went into talks to renegotiate their collective bargaining agreement that was expiring on June 30th. That agreement, called the Television Theatrical Agreement, covered feature films as well as dramatic television shows, stuff like your Law & Orders. Talks continued past the contract deadline, and eventually it was announced on July 4th that the two parties had come to an agreement. The SAG-AFTRA National Board then approved sending the proposed agreement to SAG-AFTRA members, and the next step was for SAG-AFTRA members to vote on it, whether or not to ratify the proposed agreement. Ratifying it meant it would go into effect, and not ratifying it presumably meant negotiations would reconvene. By mid-July, SAG-AFTRA released to its members a summary of the terms they'd agreed to with producers, in a document titled Summary of the 2017 Television and Theatrical Tentative Agreement. As someone who does a lot of work as a stand-in, and as someone who writes for the website Stand-In Central, I was interested in what terms were reached for stand-ins. Aside from some 2.5 to 3% raises, as far as I recall, stand-ins in the New York zone, where I primarily work, didn't receive anything else notable. However, when I stand in, I also sometimes do photo double work on the same day. In the past, I would get additional money when I did both stand-in and photo double, so it was with great interest that I read this passage in the summary. It read, Photo doubles working under Schedules X1 and X2 will now receive at least the stand-in rate, an upfront increase of nearly 17%. Just so you know, Schedule X Part 1 is the contract language of the agreement that covers background actors, stand-ins, and photo doubles in the Los Angeles zone, and Schedule X Part 2 is the contract language that covers background actors, stand-ins, and photo doubles in the New York zone. If you've ever wanted to know where all the rules for background actors reside, it's in these schedules. Our story only affects stand-ins in the New York zone, so our interest will only be in Schedule X Part 2. Now, I'm largely reading this passage as a stand-in, that photo doubles will now receive at least the stand-in rate, an upfront increase of nearly 17%. And I noticed that this announcement did not qualify what kind of photo doubles were getting the increase. The regular kind, who in most cases were getting $172, or the kind that also do stand-in work, who in most cases were getting $189 plus some additional money for photo doubling. Also, I noticed that no dollar amounts were listed, just mentioned that photo doubles would receive at least the stand-in rate, an increase of, quote, nearly 17%. So it was hard to measure what the new rates would be, if anything. Ultimately, I was confused by the passage, because did that mean as a stand-in I would be getting no additional compensation when I did photo double work, simply making the stand-in rate? Or would I be getting a nearly 17% increase when I did photo double work as a stand-in? Or would some other payment agreement apply? Whatever the case, there definitely was some misunderstanding afoot that needed clarification. Around the time that summary of the agreement was released in mid-July, SAG-AFTRA also put up a little microsite about the proposed agreement in order to answer questions members had about it. According to a page on that microsite, boldly titled, Just the Facts, quote, there has been a lot of speculation and some misinformation floating around about the new TV theatrical agreement your SAG-AFTRA National Board members just approved and recommended. Here are the facts. It goes on to point out 3 major bullet points of gains, one of which is this apparently big one, quote, outsized increases for background actors, including a boost to the photo double rate. The blurb goes on to say, That's why the National Board of Directors approved this contract and recommends that you vote yes. Don't let misinformation and misunderstanding cloud your judgment when you cast your vote. Read the materials online and vote yes today. In another place on the microsite is a frequently asked questions section. Given that I had a question about what stand-ins who photodouble would be making under the proposed agreement, I wanted to see what the microsite had to say. It didn't say anything about what stand-ins would make as photodoubles. And maybe that means the question wasn't frequent enough? To dispute that position, I offer the following anecdote. In mid to late July 2017, SAG-AFTRA held informational meetings in different cities to educate members about the proposed agreement. I couldn't attend the New York City meeting on July 17th, and I've never been able to substantiate this account, but I seem to believe that the informational meetings were recorded, so perhaps there is footage that can substantiate my account, or perhaps another person in attendance witnessed this. I heard that someone at the New York informational meeting was a stand-in who got up and asked specifically about what the rate would be for stand-ins when they also do photodouble work. That would seem to demonstrate that there is evidence of some member interest in the answer to that question. And from what I heard, none of the officials in attendance could answer the stand-in's question. Now, whether the account is true or not doesn't matter all that much because I heard the account back then, and it affected me and moved me. It frustrated me that union officials couldn't answer that question even at an informational meeting. And I decided to seek more information on that point on my own. I mean, the union's microsite did say, "Don't let misinformation and misunderstanding cloud your judgment." On July 24th, I sent my question to the email address provided on the microsite. The subject was photodouble rate, and I wrote, "Hello. My question pertains to the increase in the photodouble rate to equal the stand-in rate. A member asked this question at the NY informational meeting, as I understand, and as I understand, the question went unanswered. My question is this: bold. Question. Under the tentative agreement, when a stand-in is also asked to photodouble on the same day, will the stand-in be paid for both adjustments? In other words, will the background actor get both the stand-in adjustment as well as the special ability/photodouble adjustment under this tentative agreement? While it seems given the verbiage of the tentative agreement that both adjustments will be paid, that the question went unanswered at the meeting concerned me. Thank you for clarifying. As I know others who have this question, it would be a great addition to the FAQ. Cheers, Ben." At the time, I had thought that photodouble work was a special ability, and as I will later explain, I've since learned that's not the case. But overall, my question was clear. When a stand-in does photodouble work, what does the stand-in get paid? Also clear was my recommendation of adding my question to the microsite's FAQ. Someone from SAG-AFTRA, Fatna Salek-Williams, replied back to my email. Her title was Director of the Background Actors Department. And she first offered up some incorrect information, saying, pursuant to Schedule X Part 2, quote, a special ability background actor assigned to do photographic doubling shall receive, in addition to his basic rate, the difference between the general background actor rate and the special ability background actor rate, unquote. This language will still apply only if you do photographic doubling and not stand-in work. I say that's incorrect because that passage would actually still apply if you do photographic doubling and stand-in work. I didn't want to let misinformation and misunderstanding cloud my judgment, so I ignored Fatna's misinformation and drove more for specifics on rates, at which point she said she would have to get back to me. So I guess the answer to my question of what stand-ins would make when they photodouble under this proposed agreement wasn't entirely clear, even to the person responsible for fielding questions about it. I hope you can understand my frustration, especially given that the question had reportedly been asked about a week earlier at an informational meeting. Fatna and I got on the phone and spoke. In that conversation, I learned that the exact verbiage of the new agreement was not available yet. In other words, the summary that was posted online was just a summary, and something called the Memorandum of Agreement would be the ultimate say for rates. The Memorandum of Agreement would have the exact new contract language, but it was not available yet. Of course, I found this a bit outrageous because this meant that members were not voting on the actual contract terms, but instead on a summary of terms, kind of like voting on an outline rather than on a final draft. To reinforce that point, the SAG-AFTRA microsite explained just as much, that the Memorandum of Agreement wasn't available yet, offering this dubious explanation, quote, It takes at least several weeks, and often longer, to draft and agree upon the language of a Memorandum of Agreement, which will then be codified by adding the agreed-upon provisions into the contract books themselves, along with all the conforming changes made necessary by the addition of new language. The entire process can be very time-consuming, depending on how easily the parties are able to agree upon the new language and required changes. And it is worth taking the time to make sure that the language correctly reflects everything we bargained for. That is why nearly every ratification vote that we conduct is done on the basis of a summary. But I say that passage is dubious because SAG-AFTRA's 2016 commercials contract, a major union contract, wasn't like that. In fact, the Memorandum of Agreement for the 2016 commercials contract was online on April 13th, 2016, almost a month before the May 9th voting deadline. So while nearly every ratification vote might be done, quote, on the basis of a summary, SAG-AFTRA members in just 2016, for one of its major contracts, had the luxury of seeing a Memorandum of Agreement almost a month before a ratification vote, not several weeks or longer after voting. The Memorandum of Agreement for the 2016 commercials contract was the basis for episode 34 of this podcast. So I think my outrage was warranted that a Memorandum of Agreement wasn't available for this proposed television theatrical agreement in which I was intimately concerned. No Memorandum of Agreement meant I couldn't check on what the exact verbiage was going to be regarding stand-ins when they also photodouble. Ultimately, Fatna said in our call that she had to cross-check on the stand-in rate when photodoubling with the very busy Ray Rodriguez. Ray Rodriguez was the lead negotiator for SAG-AFTRA during the negotiations on this proposed agreement. He would ultimately know. So, we ended our call as I awaited a response. In the meantime, I dug a little into the existing television theatrical agreement for what insight it had into what stand-ins should be paid when photodoubling in the New York zone. In Schedule X Part 2, there were two different passages in the agreement around photodoubles. One applied for what I'll call your regular photodoubles, and the other applied for stand-ins who photodouble. And when I dug into the language around stand-ins who photodouble, I realized that the practice of paying stand-ins just a $10 adjustment for photodoubling for a long time just did not compute with the language in the contract. Instead, by my read of the existing contract language, stand-ins should have been making more than $10 when they photodoubled. Here's why. When you work as a photodouble, under the old contract, you were classified as a general background actor assigned to do photographic doubling. In that case, this language in Schedule X Part 2 applied. A general background actor required to do photographic doubling shall be paid the special ability background actor rate. At the time, that meant that regular photodoubles got $172, which happened to be the rate most special ability actors also got. Not the special ability rate stand-ins got, which was $189, but the rate most other special ability actors got, which was $172. $172 essentially equaled the background rate of $162 plus $10, which was the typical adjustment you got if you were a background actor and performed a special ability. Now, when you worked as a stand-in and also a photodouble, under the old contract you were classified differently from regular photodoubles. You were classified as a special ability background actor assigned to do photographic doubling. In such a case, this other language in Schedule X Part 2 applied. Listen closely for how you were supposed to be paid. There's a little subtraction formula. The language said, a special ability background actor assigned to do photographic doubling shall receive, in addition to his basic rate, the difference between the general background actor rate and the special ability background actor rate. I already mentioned there are at least two special ability rates, 172 being what I'd call typical special ability actors got, and 189 what all stand-ins got. For years, I had been doing stand-in work and thinking I should be paid $10 more when I also photodoubled. But around July 26, 2017, when I examined this passage in the existing agreement, I learned that $10 probably was not correct. Because according to this passage, I should receive my base stand-in rate, which was $189, plus the difference between the general background rate and the special ability rate. And since the special ability rate for stand-ins was $189 at the time, I should be getting for my photodouble work the difference between $162, the general background rate, and $189, the stand-in special ability rate. That difference was $27. So rather than making $189 plus 10, or $199, by my interpretation of the existing contract, I should have actually been receiving $189 plus $27, or $216. I mean, it's clear as day in Schedule X Part 2 that stand-in work is special ability work, because it's described as such in a passage. And it's clear as day that stand-in work doesn't pay the same rate as more or less typical special ability work, such as handling livestock, riding animals, doing some kinds of dancing or singing, playing or officiating sports, dealing cards, working as an amputee, or driving on set with a special license. They made $172. And it's clear as day that neither stand-ins nor these typical special ability actors receive the same rate as the actor who, get this, drives 4 horses or animals, or 6 horses or animals, on up. Huh, you say? Here's that passage. The minimum daily wage scale for a special ability background actor driving horses or other animals shall be increased by $10 for each 2 horses or other animals in excess of 2. In other words, you get the special ability rate if you drive 2 animals, that's $172. But if you drive 4, you get a higher special ability rate of $182. And if you drive 6 animals, you get $192. The contract language has no bounds. You could make $202, $212, $222 on up, depending on how many pairs above 2 animals you drive. I suppose you could make a killing if you drove a sled of 16 dogs through a snowy Times Square. I think your special ability rate would be $242. Anyway, it was clear as day that in the existing contract for the New York zone, there was no such thing as the special ability background actor rate. Instead, there were multiple special ability rates. There was $172 for typical special ability, $189 for stand-in, and $182, $192, $202. Hell, on Noah's Ark, there could have been 50,000 animals to drive, so you do the math. The point is, there is no such thing as the special ability background actor rate. There are multiple special ability background actor rates. It's important to know that there are multiple special ability rates when you then read that passage I mentioned about how stand-ins should be paid when they photo double. I was finding that the contract says I should be getting, in addition to $189 for stand-in work, the difference between the general background rate, $162, and the special ability rate, $189. That difference was $27, not $10, so when I stood in and photo doubled, I should have been making $216, not $199. The union seemed to be arriving at $199 by saying, well, typical special ability work is the special ability background actor rate, so for the photo double adjustment for stand-ins, you take the difference between the general background rate and some other person's special ability rate. That just doesn't compute. Why would the union take someone else's special ability rate rather than your special ability rate in figuring how much you should get paid as a stand-in for photo doubling? You want to arbitrarily use someone's rate who's dancing or singing or handling livestock and say that that's the rate to use when figuring out how much to pay me for photo double work, rather than use my special ability rate as a stand-in to figure out how much to pay me? How is that logical or even arguable? So, around July 26, 2017, I figured out that strange fluke in the existing contract and its administration that suggested for years stand-ins who photo doubled weren't getting the pay they were guaranteed as worded in the contract. And on July 31st, I spoke again to Fatna. I could be wrong, but I don't believe she had consulted with lead negotiator Ray Rodriguez, as I don't think he was mentioned in our conversation. As I recall, she had said he was very busy, so yeah. Fatna had spoken to 2 SAG-AFTRA New York local officials, Mary Hatch, who handled New York television contracts, and Stephanie Perry, who handled New York feature film contracts. According to Fatna, both of them interpreted that stand-ins doing photo double work should receive a $10 adjustment under the existing agreement, and that would continue under the proposed agreement. In other words, stand-ins would receive their stand-in rate plus another $10 to photo double. Which was understandable and expected to some degree they'd argue that, but I obviously was armed with a new interpretation of the contract, and I wondered how that circle squared with the union saying on its microsite that photo doubles would receive, without qualification, quote, a boost to the photo double rate. Clearly that was not happening for stand-ins if they were continuing to only get $10 when they photo doubled, because that's the same rate presumably they were getting before, not a boost. So I explained to Fatna that while stand-ins are considered special ability, they don't make the special ability rate other special ability make. Stand-ins make a higher special ability rate, so a $10 adjustment for photo doubling didn't make any sense. Instead, something larger did, because the difference between the general background rate and stand-in rate is larger than $10. However, as SAG-AFTRA director of the background department, somehow Fatna was not versed in the New York zone and deferred to Mary and Stephanie at SAG-AFTRA New York. So here I was, talking to someone charged with answering my question about the proposed agreement, and I was more confused than ever about what stand-ins make when they photo double, given that paying stand-ins $10 to photo double didn't compute, and that didn't seem to be changing, despite the union publicizing that photo doubles are getting a boost in pay. So much for don't let misinformation and misunderstanding cloud your judgment. One last thing on this story point. Recall that I recommended to Fatna to include in the frequently asked questions section of the microsite an answer to the question of the rate for stand-ins when they also photo double. It's April 2018. It's still not there, so I guess I'm being patient. I wasn't settled about this whole topic of what stand-ins who photo double should make, especially after discovering that a $10 adjustment was logically inconsistent with the contract verbiage. So I decided to contact Mary Hatch, the manager for television contracts at the New York local, to discuss my interpretation. After all, I wanted to make sure I made contractually guaranteed money as a stand-in when I photo doubled, and because SAG-AFTRA had been promoting photo double gains in these recent negotiations. On August 3rd, 2017, I talked on the phone with Mary. I argued my case for a rate of $216 for stand-ins who photo double, based on my interpretation of the contract language. After the phone call with Mary, I believe she understood my perspective. I was also under the impression from her, though, that past practice of paying $10 to stand-ins for photo double work, despite the wording in the existing contract, may have more power than a new interpretation of the contract language. I said that ratification of the agreement was the perfect time to start enforcing my interpretation of the contract language, meaning stand-ins should receive a higher amount than $10 for their photo double work in the New York zone. And I also said, if stand-ins continued to only get $10 when they also photo double, they are not getting the, quote, outsized raises that SAG-AFTRA is publicly championing photo doubles will be receiving under the proposed agreement. Mary heard me, but, nothing happened. My interpretation didn't seem to go anywhere. My observation that stand-ins wouldn't be getting photo doubles outsized raises, which the union loudly touted, didn't seem to change anything. About 4 days later, on August 7th, SAG-AFTRA members, quote, overwhelmingly ratified the 2017 Television Theatrical Agreement. SAG-AFTRA's press release announcing the ratification repeated this cringeworthy gem, quote, additional increases for background performers include a boost to the photo double rate, an upfront increase of nearly 17%. Onward into darkness, stand-ins like me went, about our rates when we photo doubled under the new agreement. Except for, presumably, we'd still just be getting a rather illogical $10 when photo doubling. We were without a Memorandum of Agreement to double-check if this was appropriate. So that's part one of the story. So, what happened after members ratified the proposed Television Theatrical Agreement? Part two is what happened. The new rates arrived. Regular photo doubles got a wage increase from $172 to $194, a $22 increase. Regular special ability got a wage increase from $172 to $176, a $4 increase. Stand-ins got a wage increase from $189 to $194, a $5 increase. And stand-ins who photo double also got an increase from $199 to $204, a $5 increase. I should note that that's what SAG-AFTRA was saying were the rates for stand-ins who photo doubled. They took the stand-in rate of $194 and added the difference between the new general background rate, $166, and the new regular special ability rate, $176, making $204. I still believe stand-ins who photo doubled should have gotten $194 plus the difference between $166 and $194, the new stand-in rate. That difference was now $28, so in my opinion, stand-ins who did photo double work should have received $222, not what SAG-AFTRA said, which was $204. Pretty big difference in interpretation there. It is my understanding that SAG-AFTRA field reps made a similar argument for stand-ins who photo double, and it is also my understanding that SAG-AFTRA Legal or some other authoritative entity shot that interpretation down. Just a quick side note, I just quoted rates if you worked on feature films and dramatic TV shows. If you were working under a legacy AFTRA TV show, the rates are about $4 to $6 higher on those productions, As I continue, I'm going to ignore the legacy AFTRA rates. Just keep in mind that when I mention a rate, the legacy AFTRA shows make somewhere around $4 to $6 more. So, regular photo doubles were now making $194 rather than $172. SAG-AFTRA had said in the summary to members that photo doubles would now be receiving the stand-in rate, which is what $194 is. But the summary also said that photo doubles would now be receiving, quote, an upfront increase of nearly 17%. Did that happen? Well, a $22 increase from $172 to $194 is not a nearly 17% increase. Instead, it's an 11.3% increase. So, where did SAG-AFTRA pull the percentage of nearly 17%? I'm not entirely sure, but by my guess, SAG-AFTRA did some shady math. SAG-AFTRA used the old background actor rate of 162 rather than the old photo double rate of 172 in figuring a nearly 17% increase. The difference between the new photo double rate of $194 and the old background actor rate of $162 is $32. An increase from $162 to $194 is, wait for it, 16.5%. That's the nearly 17%. So it would seem that SAG-AFTRA misrepresented to voting members the percent increase photo doubles would be receiving under the proposed agreement. They represented loud and proud a nearly 17% increase, but actually gave regular photo doubles only an 11.3% increase. SAG-AFTRA seemed to have used an old general background rate rather than an old photo double rate to beef up the gains photo doubles made. And that's not just wrong, that's deceitful. I told you earlier on that this topic is very niche, that it was about the pay rate of stand-ins doing photo double work in TV and film in the New York zone. But in telling that story, it opened up a whole can of worms. That SAG-AFTRA misrepresented to voting members the actual increase photo doubles would receive. The implications are astounding because, more generally, I'm talking about SAG-AFTRA, a labor union, telling its members to vote yes on a proposed contract, saying it is tamping down on speculation and misunderstanding as not to cloud members' judgment, all the while telling voters patently false information about the proposed contract. Furthermore, SAG-AFTRA was also making it hard for members to verify the truth of that information by reportedly having no answer at an informational meeting, no memorandum of agreement available to members despite past evidence they have been available, a director charged with answering contract questions who provided wrong information, wasn't versed in the New York portion of the contract, never got the frequently asked questions updated to answer a question about stand-in rates when they photo double, and deferred to a very busy lead negotiator. I mean, is this cool with you? If you voted, does it bother you that you were presented with false claims about the proposal you were voting on? Does it trouble you that expert answers to legitimate contract questions were not more readily available? It does me. And it also bothers me that you may have voted on a SAG-AFTRA contract in 2017 under false pretenses. I'm still in part 2 of the story, and it doesn't stop here. Because after members ratified the 2017 Television Theatrical Agreement, I wanted to see this damn Memorandum of Agreement so I could see what it said about stand-ins who photo double, if anything. By the end of August, the new rate sheets were out, so I figured if the rates were clear, then the Memorandum of Agreement must be out. But it wasn't. It wasn't available in September either. Nor was it available in October, some 2 months after ratification. Nor was it available in November. I had heard from field reps that some high-budget new media producers had objected to some of the rate increases, which were stalling things, which I more or less got confirmation on from a manager at the union. Finally, on December 11th, 2017, I got word that the Memorandum of Agreement was online. It didn't say anything about stand-ins who photo double and what they would be making. Instead, pertinent to what we're talking about, the only thing changed was for regular photo doubles who would be receiving, as expected, the stand-in rate. The interesting thing that I found was that the Memorandum of Agreement was dated September 29th, 2017. That's about 2.5 months earlier than its release online and well over a month after the agreement had been ratified. Granted, apparently the agreement had been up for debate with high-budget new media producers, which makes me a little nervous to hear because what does that even mean if members had ratified it already? But presumably, that was all settled by December 11th. Finally seeing the Memorandum of Agreement was a sort of defeat, given that there was no mention of increases for stand-ins who photo double, only an increase for regular photo doubles. And it was a shock to see that that had been more or less settled all the way back in September. In the fall of 2017, during the time before the release of the Memorandum of Agreement, I talked to a few stand-ins who occasionally did photo double work on the same day. Some of them were paid only the stand-in rate when they also photo doubled. That is, $194, not $204. Probably the result of confusion that photo doubles were now making the stand-in rate, so people must have thought stand-ins don't get paid anything more when they also photo double. I explained to a few stand-ins the language in the contract about how stand-ins who photo double were supposed to be paid more than the stand-in rate. I helped some stand-ins argue for more money, for $222 rather than $204, and why I believed $204 didn't compute. I even did this after the Memorandum of Agreement came out, since the Memorandum of Agreement didn't tamper with the prior agreement's language on that point, so my interpretation was still valid. I didn't really go much into that photo doubles should have been getting a, quote, nearly 17% increase. I simply focused on getting stand-ins $222 when they photo doubled, not just $204. I don't think I ever succeeded, but I did awaken stand-ins to the contract language they were working under. This is about when part 3 of the story begins. In late January 2018, I was up for a film job, advertised as a stand-in/photo double. I was in a position to be paid for both stand-in and photo double, and I really wanted to make my case for $222 rather than $204 should I get the job. Basically, I wanted to show up to work knowing what the contracted rate should be, so production wouldn't go, no, we don't think that's correct. Around the same time, a fellow stand-in showed me an unsettling document that I hadn't seen yet, a more explicit rate sheet published by SAG-AFTRA that actually mentioned what stand-ins who photo double should be making. The document said that, quote, stand-in with photo doubling was $204. There was not much disputing contract language with productions now. This is what the union was saying that rate was for stand-ins who photo double. $204 was the rate SAG-AFTRA was resoundingly declaring on a rate sheet that stand-ins who photo doubled should make. So the issue for me transformed from something to dispute on the job with productions into something to dispute with the union. Apparently my talk with Mary Hatch in August 2017 hadn't changed anyone's minds that stand-ins who photo doubled should be making more than a $10 adjustment. I still had no explanation why SAG-AFTRA was still interpreting they get a $10 adjustment, despite the contract language suggesting a larger adjustment. And there was still this ongoing question of where is the nearly 17% increase for photo doubles? So here I was in a position to be paid potentially for both stand-in and photo double, and I really wanted to feel confident about $222, and if not $222, I wanted to understand the union's reasoning why they believe the contract language computes to $204 rather than $222. I emailed Stephanie Perry, Director of Theatrical Contracts, on January 21st, 2018. I explained to her my read that stand-ins who do photo double work should receive $222, that stand-ins are special ability background actors, and that when they photo double, the passage that says they should receive their basic rate plus the difference between the general background rate and the special ability rate would mean the stand-in who photo doubles should receive $194 plus $194 minus $166, or $222. Stephanie replied, quote, this question has been vetted with our chief of contracts, and the rate of $204 would be due to background actors who are employed as stand-ins and are asked to do photographic doubling. It didn't take me long to figure out that our chief of contracts, whose name Stephanie had kept out of her reply, was actually Ray Rodriguez, whom Fatna had mentioned to me as the person who could ultimately say what stand-ins who photo double would make, and who was the lead negotiator of the 2017 Television Theatrical Agreement. So immediately I thought, why talk to Stephanie if it was Ray who had, quote, vetted the rate of $204, and who would be the ultimate resource for understanding why a rate of $204 computes? I figured I should just go straight to Ray Rodriguez for his reasons why he vetted that rate. Well, I emailed Ray Rodriguez on January 23rd, 2018, expressing some amount of urgency given the pending stand-in photo double job. I was asking for information on why he, quote, vetted that stand-ins who photo double in the New York zone should make $204 rather than $222. I wanted to come armed to the job knowing what rate I should make, and armed with argumentation in case my claim for $222 was disputed by production. Ray didn't email me back in time. So I emailed him again 5 days later on January 28th, the day before a camera test. I can certainly imagine he was busy, and obviously the urgency for me was upped. I emailed him again on February 5th, and again, February 15th. No replies for either of these emails, or the prior urgent too. No contact from any assistants who might be working for him either, in the case that he was very busy and had to delegate things. I emailed him also on February 26th, after no reply in over a month from my original email. Oh, and I also emailed him on March 19th, in case, he's been very busy. And I'm releasing this podcast episode on April 19th, which is about 3 months after my urgent January email, in light of a possible stand-in/photo double job, and I still haven't gotten a reply from Ray Rodriguez, or an assistant, or another lawyer who can speak to Ray's reasoning and, quote, vetting of the rate. I mean, that's a long time to not reply to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 emails over the course of 1, 2, 3 months about a contract question he apparently is the only SAG-AFTRA official who can truly answer. When I asked Stephanie in a March 20th call with her why Ray hadn't replied, she speculated because he is very busy. But January, February, March, April, and no reply after 6 emails and expression of urgency. That call with Stephanie on March 20th led me to the sadness I have today. In that call, it was clear to me that Stephanie understood my argument for 222 for stand-ins who photo double. However, despite understanding my argument, my sense from Stephanie was that 222 simply was not the union's interpretation. Even though the union's interpretation of 204, in my opinion, did not compute. Even though I cite that there is no such thing as the special ability background actor rate, but multiple special ability rates, so some random other special ability rate should not be used in calculating the rate for a stand-in doing photo double work. Even though I pointed out to Stephanie that the contract also has a portion that says that members working under the contract could not be paid by a producer at below the minimum rates established in the contract, and that with the 2017 agreement, the adjustment for photo doubling was rendered as $28. So to only get a $10 adjustment when photo doubling as a stand-in, that stand-in was making below the minimum rate for photo doubling, which is not permitted by the contract. I'll let you guess whether that argument had any sway with Stephanie. Even though I pointed out that photo doubles were not making the nearly 17% increase SAG-AFTRA had publicized, and instead were making an 11.3% increase, if you weren't counting stand-ins who photo doubled, in which case it wasn't even near an 11.3% increase. She said she or Fatna would get back to me on that. Nothing yet on that point. About a month later, and about 9 months after the agreement was ratified. Ultimately, when it came down to it, what I learned was that there was the contract language, there was my interpretation, and there was SAG-AFTRA's interpretation. And I could not talk to the person who vetted SAG-AFTRA's interpretation, Ray Rodriguez, and I was stuck without any understanding why SAG-AFTRA was taking a position that stand-ins should be paid a lower illogical rate when they photo doubled, rather than a higher, more logical rate. All I could understand was that it was past practice to pay $10 to stand-ins when photo doubling, even though that didn't compute with the contract language. Now, Stephanie did say I could negotiate higher for myself, which, interestingly, for this job I was up for, when I was eventually asked about my interest and availability for the job, I did ask for a higher rate. And the casting director promptly turned me down. And in that hiring process, I was asked about my rate on other stand-in jobs, a question that is illegal in New York City as of October 31st, 2017. So, yeah, that was fun, SAG-AFTRA. So this is where I am now, at the end of part 3 of the story, which is the release of this podcast episode. I'm sad. SAG-AFTRA does not interpret the contract language in a way that computes, by my read, and I presume now by your read. As a result of this illogic, I and other stand-ins in feature films and dramatic television are not able to make a higher wage for photo double work when standing in, not get an upfront increase of nearly 17% that photo doubles were reportedly going to make when the proposed agreement was ratified, not get the $22 raise that regular photo doubles got. Instead, getting paid less for photo double work than regular background actors in getting only $10 for photo doubling rather than $22. At that, here I also am now. SAG-AFTRA pushed to members false information about their proposed agreement and told them to vote yes on that proposed agreement. And now that agreement is in effect, even though there was evidence of a bait and switch by the union, a baiting of a higher increase for photo doubles of nearly 17% and switching it to an 11.3% increase, and only having it for regular photo doubles, not stand-ins who photo double, and not publicly sharing that information in the summary agreement, at an informational meeting, on an informational microsite, and making it damned hard to get a clear answer on the rate, and making us wait several months after ratification to see the actual contract language. So there you have it. What is there to do? I can't do anything. I'm FICOR. I can't vote on the contracts. The best I can do is tell you about my experience and interpretations and have you do something with that information when you vote. Or when you investigate further, when the union makes it hard to get straight answers or makes misleading statements about its gains. Was there wrongdoing? Or is this all just kosher and right and as things should be? I'll leave that for you to decide. Thanks for listening. Oh, wait. Before I go, let me check my email to see if Ray Rodriguez got back to me. Nope. This episode was sponsored by StandInCentral.com. To download the Stand-In Handbook and the Call Sheet Cheat Sheet, visit StandInCentral.com/handbook. That's StandInCentral.com/handbook. The show notes for this episode are available at actingincome.com/episode 36, where you can also leave a comment on this episode. You can also find Acting Income on Twitter and Facebook. Have a story idea? Shoot me an email at actingincome.com/pitch. And be sure to click the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app to get new episodes of the podcast as they're released. I'm Ben Hauck. See you next episode. And for more information, as always, check out actingincome.com.